Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey Herman and Corn, I mentioned that I want to print up because we found this great local digital printer and right now we're moving apartment, and I have to say it's a bit discouraging. We talked many episodes about my travails as a long-term renter in Israel. It's discouraging and actually sometimes a bit soul destroying to have to repeatedly set up a home office only to then have to kind of take it all down again in 3 years and start over again. So maybe for that reason, as a therapeutic endeavor, I'm going to print out a little book of inspirational office setups for when we finally get permanently established here. And I mentioned that I used to collect photographs of these really impressive multi-monitor workstations. And I was just searching Google Images basically for multi-monitor workstation or some similar keywords, and I came across, really interesting, not only workspaces, monitor configurations, but also careers. We've probably all seen those images of financial day traders with, sometimes 8 or 9 monitors in a big array and lots of charts. And we did an episode about flight operation centers, but a big user that came up disproportionately is dispatch centers, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. So when we call 999 or whatever the emergency number is in your area, we're going to be routed to one of these places, and I have a number of questions that I think their work, I'm sure, is very much underappreciated. So when you call one of these centers, can they dispatch everything? Because often in emergencies, you'll see multiple services attending something like the police plus ambulance plus fire. So I always assumed that these centers were connected to all these different services, but I'm wondering if that's the case. Second question regarding the screens. I mentioned they're big arrays. That's if you look at these centers and you can just type in ambulance dispatch center to Google Images and you'll find photos for anyone curious as to what they look like. But it's one of those kind of NASA control center style rooms where you have workstations, and the one in Israel that was in the news, they have an intriguing layout actually, 4 vertical screens per user, so in kind of that vertical document mode. But anyway, a big bank of screens, and so they're looking at a lot of information, and I wonder what exactly is all that information that they need to keep an eye on, because presumably they're speaking to one person at a time. The other thing I'd be very curious to know about is doing this job itself. How much training is required to become a emergency center dispatcher? Is this I assume it's a totally separate career track to being an EMT, but they must collaborate, I assume, quite deeply, because you have to, I guess, understand their job. But more than that, if you're taking calls for, an 8-hour shift and doing this many days per week, I just really wonder how they deal with that emotional load, because you're going to be dealing with Israel released some of the raw audio of the first call to emergency services on October 7th, and for anyone who's listened to these recordings, and they do, they come up in the news periodically, what always kind of seems unusual or striking is that the dispatcher always sounds calm. The person on the other end of the line is saying, oh my gosh, there is someone with a knife, or this person is bleeding, they have no pulse, all these things. And the dispatcher has to remain cool as ice. So I imagine that's not easy. The other thing that I guess always that I always wonder is, how do they avoid becoming desensitized? Because we talked about triage in a previous episode. And if their job is triaging the cases that they get, eventually you're going to, what started out as being a shocking emergency is going to just become background noise. And it's interesting. I'd love to know how psychologically they're built to do this job, and I presume and hope that they have really good internal psychological help, that if someone becomes overwhelmed or distressed by a certain call, that they have the help that they need. So Herman and Corn, I'd love to know about this world. We, I guess, take it for granted, or we see the loud sirens and the flashing lights when you see the emergency services doing what they do. But there's a whole back office operation that's far less visible, and I'd like to talk about their work in today's episode.
You know, Herman, I was just watching Daniel try to organize his new desk setup in the other room. We're in the middle of this move here in Jerusalem, and he is absolutely obsessed with these multi-monitor configurations. He actually sent us a prompt today about something that has been on his mind, because of all those photos he's been collecting for his home office inspiration book.
Herman Poppleberry at your service. Yeah, I saw those photos. He is looking at these massive command centers, specifically emergency dispatch centers. It is funny how a search for desk setups can lead you down a rabbit hole into the world of public safety telecommunications. But it is a fascinating world, Corn. Most people only think about the person on the other end of the line when they are having the worst day of their lives. But the infrastructure and the psychology behind that headset are incredible. It is a high-stakes environment where seconds literally equate to lives saved or lost.
It really is. Daniel was asking some great questions here. He wants to know if they dispatch everyone at once, like the police, fire, and ambulance services, and what they are actually looking at on those 8 different screens. Plus, he is curious about the career itself. Is it a separate track from being an emergency medical technician? And of course, the big one, how do they stay so calm when the world is quite literally on fire for the person calling in?
Those are the right questions to ask. We often call paramedics and firefighters the first responders. But in the industry, dispatchers are often referred to as the first responders. They are the initial point of contact. To answer Daniel's first question about whether they dispatch everyone simultaneously, the answer is it depends, but usually it is a very orchestrated sequence. In the United States and many other places, they use what is called a Public Safety Answering Point, or a PSAP. As of February 2026, there are over 5,000 of these centers across the U.S. alone, and they are becoming increasingly integrated.
Right, I have heard that term. So, when you dial 911, you are hitting a PSAP. But does that mean one person is talking to the police and the ambulance at the same time?
Not necessarily. There are primary PSAPs and secondary PSAPs. A primary one is where the call first lands. Often, this is a police dispatch center or a county-wide communications hub. They get the basic information. Where's the emergency and what is the nature of it? If you say it is a heart attack, they might stay on the line but also perform what is called a warm transfer to a secondary PSAP, which would be the Emergency Medical Services Dispatch. During a warm transfer, the original call taker stays on the line to ensure the connection is made and the information is handed off correctly.
So, it is like a relay race. But in a big accident, say a multi-car pileup on the highway, you need everyone. You need fire for extraction, police for traffic control, and ambulances for the injured. Does one person trigger all of those?
In modern systems, they use something called Computer-Aided Dispatch, or CAD. When the dispatcher enters the code for a major vehicle accident with injuries, the CAD system automatically suggests a response package. This is a predetermined list of units based on the severity of the call. It will show the nearest available fire engine, the nearest police units, and the closest ambulances using AVL, which stands for Automatic Vehicle Location. The dispatcher can then hit a single button to alert all of those agencies nearly simultaneously. In some integrated centers, the police and fire dispatchers are sitting 10 feet away from each other. They might even just shout across the room while they are typing to coordinate in real time.
That makes sense. The technology handles the distribution, while the human handles the communication. But let us talk about those screens. Daniel mentioned the N.A.S.A style setups. Why on earth does one person need 6 or 8 monitors? I can barely handle 2 when I'm looking at spreadsheets.
It looks like overkill, but when you break down what they are doing, every square inch of that screen real estate is vital. Typically, 1 or 2 monitors are dedicated entirely to the CAD system I mentioned. This is the heart of the operation. This is where they type in the call details and see the status of every unit in the field. They can see which police cars are on a lunch break, which ones are at the jail, which ones are patrolling, and which ones are currently tied up on other calls.
Okay, so that is 2 screens. What about the rest?
Then you have the Mapping and Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. This is huge. When you call from a cell phone, the system tries to triangulate your position using LSP, or location service providers. The dispatcher is looking at a high-resolution map that shows your location, often with a circle of uncertainty around it. As of 2026, we are seeing much better Z-axis data, which tells the dispatcher what floor of a high-rise building you are on. The map also shows the location of all the emergency vehicles in real time, and often things like building floor plans, hazardous material storage locations, or where the nearest fire hydrants are.
I imagine they also have a screen for the phone system itself, right? To see incoming calls and caller identification info.
Exactly. That is usually a separate interface called the VESTA, or a similar next-gen 911 phone system. It shows the queue of incoming calls, the priority level, and the callback number. And then you have the radio console. This is a digital interface where they can see which radio channels are active. They might be monitoring 5 or 6 different frequencies at once: the main police channel, a tactical channel for ongoing incidents, a fire channel, and a regional mutual aid channel. They use a mouse or a touch screen to toggle between who they are talking to.
It sounds like a high-stakes video game, but without a pause button. I read that some centers even have screens for weather radar and news feeds.
They do. If there is a major storm coming through Jerusalem or any big city, the dispatchers need to know if certain roads are going to flood, or if the wind is too high for the life flight helicopters to take off. Many centers now have a monitor dedicated to real-time crime center feeds. If a caller says there is a crash at a specific intersection, the dispatcher can pull up the citywide traffic camera feed and see for themselves how bad it is before the police even arrive. It gives them eyes on the scene, which is a massive advantage for situational awareness.
That is an incredible amount of information to process. It brings us to the career aspect. Daniel was wondering if this is a separate track from being an EMT. I always assumed they were retired street medics who wanted a desk job, but that is not really the case, is it?
Not anymore. It used to be more common for it to be a secondary career for injured or older field personnel, but today it is very much its own professional track. In fact, there has been a major legislative push recently to reclassify dispatchers as protective service occupations, rather than just administrative or clerical workers. This recognizes the life-saving nature of the work. The skill set is totally different from field work. An EMT needs physical stamina and hands-on clinical skills. A dispatcher needs incredible multitasking abilities, a calm voice, and the ability to visualize a scene based only on what they hear.
What kind of training are we talking about? It can't just be learning how to use the software.
Far from it. In the United States, there are national standards from organizations like the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, or APCO, and the National Emergency Number Association, or N.A.S.A. Training can take anywhere from 6 months to a year before you are allowed to sit at the console alone. They have to learn legal liabilities, how to handle suicidal callers, domestic violence protocols, and basic medical instructions. Many states now require a specific certification called the Public Safety Telecommunicator Certification.
That is an important point. When the dispatcher tells you how to do CPR over the phone while the ambulance is driving, they are following a specific script, right?
Yes, it is called Emergency Medical Dispatch, or EMD. They use these highly researched protocols, like the Medical Priority Dispatch System. It is a series of questions that lead to a specific instruction. If you tell them someone is choking, the system tells them exactly what to say to you so you can perform the Heimlich maneuver. They are essentially providing medical care through your hands. It is a very high level of responsibility, and they have to follow the script exactly to avoid liability and ensure the best patient outcome.
It is interesting because you are acting as a bridge. You are the only link between the victim and the help. I can see why the training is so rigorous. But let us get into the heavy stuff, the emotional load. Daniel mentioned how calm they sound. I have listened to some of those tapes, and it is eerie. Someone is screaming that their house is being broken into, and the dispatcher sounds like they are ordering a pizza. Is that a natural trait, or is it trained?
It is a bit of both, but mostly it is training and protocol. There is a psychological concept called emotional contagion. If the dispatcher starts panicking and screaming, the caller is going to panic even more, which makes it impossible to get accurate information. By staying calm and using a firm, repetitive voice, the dispatcher can actually bring the caller's heart rate down. They are taught to use a technique called persistent repetition. If a caller is hysterical, the dispatcher will repeat the same command, like, "Tell me your address," in the exact same tone and volume until it breaks through the hysteria.
Persistent repetition. That is fascinating. It is like an anchor for the caller. But what about the dispatcher? They are hearing the most horrific things. They hear the screams. They hear the gunshots. They hear the last breaths of people. And then the call ends, and they have to pick up the next one. How do they not just break down?
This is one of the biggest challenges in the profession right now. It is called vicarious trauma or secondary traumatic stress. Unlike a paramedic who sees the patient, helps them, and sees the outcome, the dispatcher often has no closure. They hear the trauma, and then the line goes dead. They don't know if the baby lived or if the police caught the suspect. That lack of closure can be even more taxing on the brain than seeing the event in person, because the mind fills in the blanks with the worst possible scenarios.
I hadn't thought about the closure aspect. That is a huge point. If you see a wound and you bandage it, your brain processes that as a completed task. If you just hear a scream and then silence, your brain stays in a state of high alert.
Exactly. To manage this, many modern centers have implemented robust psychological support. They have peer support teams, which are fellow dispatchers trained to recognize signs of stress in their colleagues. After a particularly bad call, like a child death or an officer-involved shooting, many agencies have a mandatory debriefing. They pull the dispatcher off the floor immediately, give them time to decompress, and have them talk to a mental health professional. There are also apps now, like Cortico, specifically designed for first responders to track their mental health and access resources anonymously.
And what about the desensitization? Daniel asked how they avoid becoming jaded. I imagine after 10 years of hearing people lie to you or scream at you for no reason, you might start to lose your empathy.
It is a real risk. Burnout in dispatch centers is incredibly high, with some centers seeing turnover rates of 20 to 30% annually. The ones who stay often develop a very dark sense of humor as a coping mechanism, which is common in all first responder fields. But the danger is when that turns into cynicism. If you start assuming every caller is lying, you might miss the one who is actually in danger.
So, how do they fight that? Is there a way to stay human in that environment?
A lot of it comes down to the culture of the center. The best centers emphasize that every call is a new person who is having their worst day. They also encourage dispatchers to go on ride-alongs with the police and fire departments. When a dispatcher spends a shift in the back of an ambulance, they see the faces of the people they have been talking to. It reconnects the voice on the phone to a real human being. It bridges that gap created by the headset and the digital screens.
That makes so much sense. Seeing the result of your work in the real world must be incredibly validating. You mentioned Jerusalem earlier. I know that here in Israel, the Magen David Adam dispatchers have a very integrated system. They actually use a lot of volunteer dispatchers who are also active EMTs, right?
Yes, Israel has a very unique model. Because it is a smaller country with a high level of medical training among the population, the integration between the dispatch center and the field is very tight. Many of the people you talk to on the emergency line in Jerusalem are actually off-duty paramedics or medical students. This creates a very high level of clinical expertise on the phone. They can often diagnose a situation very quickly because they have seen it 1,000 times in the field. It is a model that some U.S. cities are looking at to help with staffing shortages.
It is a different approach, but it seems effective for a high-stress environment. Let us talk about the future for a second. Daniel's interest in the monitors makes me wonder where this is going. Are we going to see AI taking over these roles? Or maybe video calls becoming the standard?
We are already seeing the beginning of next generation 911 or NG 911. This is a shift from old analog phone lines to internet protocol-based systems. This allows for things like texting to 911, which is huge for domestic violence victims or people in active shooter situations who can't speak out loud. And yes, video is coming. Companies like Carbine and RapidsOS are already implementing systems where a dispatcher can send a link to a caller's phone, and if the caller clicks it, the dispatcher can see a live video feed from the scene.
That sounds like it would be incredibly helpful for the patient, but wouldn't that make the emotional load on the dispatcher even worse? Now they aren't just hearing the trauma, they are seeing it in high definition.
That is the big debate in the industry right now. The technology is there, but the human brain might not be ready for it. If you add the visual element, you are essentially giving the dispatcher the same level of trauma as the person on the scene, but without the physical ability to do anything about it. Some experts are worried that video dispatching will lead to even higher rates of PTSD among dispatchers. There is a lot of research being done right now on how to filter those images or provide better support for visual dispatchers.
It is a double-edged sword. More information leads to better outcomes, but at a higher cost to the operator. I wonder if AI will be used to filter that. Maybe an AI scans the video and just gives the dispatcher the relevant data points, like heart rate or the presence of a weapon, without making them watch the whole scene.
That is exactly what is being researched as of 2026. AI could act as a buffer. It could also listen to the call in the background and automatically pull up the relevant protocols or hazmat data. If it hears the word chemicals and truck, it could instantly show the dispatcher the evacuation zone for various substances. It becomes a digital partner rather than a replacement. AI is also being used for real-time translation, which is a game changer in diverse cities. A dispatcher can speak English, and the AI can translate it into Spanish or Arabic for the caller in real time, and vice versa.
I like that idea of a digital partner. It takes some of the cognitive load off the humans so they can focus on the empathy and the communication. Because at the end of the day, when you are terrified, you don't want to talk to a robot. You want to hear a human voice telling you that help is on the way.
Exactly. You can't automate empathy. You can't automate the ability to talk someone down from a ledge or keep a parent calm while they are waiting for an ambulance for their child. That human connection is the core of the job. The monitors and the CAD systems are just tools to make that connection more effective.
It really puts Daniel's home office goals into perspective. He wants the cool screens, but he probably doesn't want the responsibility that comes with them in a dispatch center.
Definitely not. I think he will stick to using his monitors for video editing and searching for the best hummus in Jerusalem. But it is good that he asked. It is a profession that deserves a lot more recognition than it gets. They are the invisible thread that holds the entire emergency response system together. Without them, the fire trucks and ambulances are just sitting in stations, blind to where they are needed.
They really are. I think about the sheer volume of calls too. In a major city, a single dispatcher might handle dozens of emergency calls in an 8-hour shift. That is a lot of life or death decisions made before most people have finished their morning coffee.
And the stakes are so high. A single typo in a CAD system, like putting street instead of avenue, can delay an ambulance by 5 minutes. In a cardiac arrest, 5 minutes is the difference between life and death. The level of precision required while under extreme stress is just staggering. They have to be perfect every single time, even when the person they are talking to is at their most imperfect.
It makes me wonder about the physical environment of these centers. Daniel's photos show these sleek rooms, but what is it actually like to be in there for 12 hours? I have heard they have special furniture.
Oh, the furniture is a whole industry in itself. They have these heavy-duty 24/7 rated chairs that cost thousands of dollars because they are built to be sat in every minute of every day for years. And the desks are often motorized so the dispatchers can stand up or sit down without losing sight of their screens. Many centers also have special lighting that mimics the time of day to help with the circadian rhythms of people working the graveyard shift. Some even have treadmill desks or bike desks to help dispatchers stay alert during the slow hours of the night.
That is smart. Anything to reduce the physical strain when the mental strain is so high. I also read that some centers have quiet rooms or even exercise equipment so they can burn off the adrenaline after a big call.
Yeah, the quiet room or respite room is becoming a standard. It is a place with no screens, no phones, just soft lighting and maybe some comfortable chairs or even a massage chair. It is a sanctuary. When your brain has been processing 8 streams of data for hours, you need a place where the input is 0. It helps prevent that cognitive overload that leads to mistakes.
It is a fascinating ecosystem. From the CAD software to the psychological debriefing, everything is designed to support that one person with the headset. It is a masterclass in human factors engineering.
It really is. And it is a reminder that behind every siren we hear in Jerusalem, there was a conversation that happened first. There was someone who took a chaotic, terrifying situation and turned it into an organized response. They are the calm in the center of the storm.
Well, I think we have given Daniel a lot to think about for his office setup. Maybe he will add a quiet room to the new apartment.
He could certainly use one after this move. Moving house is its own kind of emergency, though usually not a 911 level 1.
Truly. Well, this has been a great deep dive. I feel like I have a much better appreciation for what happens when you dial those 3 digits. It is not just a phone call. It is the start of a massive, high-tech, deeply human operation.
Precisely. And if you are listening and you have ever had to make that call, you know how much that voice on the other end means. They are the lifeline.
Absolutely. Hey, if you are enjoying the show and these deep dives into the weird prompts Daniel sends us, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and helps us keep this collaboration going.
It really does. We love seeing the feedback and knowing what topics are resonating with you all. We have covered everything from the physics of black holes to the history of the stapler, and we have no plans of stopping.
You can find all our past episodes, all 530 of them, at myweirdprompts.com. We have an RSS feed there too, if you want to subscribe directly.
Thanks for joining us today in our new Jerusalem headquarters. This has been My Weird Prompts.
We will talk to you in the next one. Bye!
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.